Hey, Moneymakers, welcome to another episode of Taking Stock Live. I'm your host, Kalila, and it's another week of money talk, of bringing you all the latest business news and telling you how it will affect you and your money. Well, the budget debates in Jamaica 2026 have finally begun. Finance Minister Fayval Williams made her opening presentation today. We're going to bring you highlights of what she said, what those revenue measures entail, and more. And then later on in the show, we're going to be talking about how you can make wealth happen at every single stage of life. But first, leave those comments in the chat. Let me know what part of Jamaica or what part of the world you're joining us from. Also, let me know what you think about the budget before we play some of those clips and dive into it, because I have a lot of thoughts about that. Remember to like this video, subscribe to this channel, share with a friend, let them know that Taking Stock is on and live. And also subscribe to the newsletter at getmoneynews.com. That's getmoneynews.com. So you can get breaking money news, investment alerts, and more straight to your inbox every single day. Now, come on, let's get this money.
But first, here's What's Hot, brought to you by JMMB Group, your best interest at heart.
Jamaica has ended its decades-long medical cooperation program with Cuba. The decision ends a partnership that has supplied doctors and specialists to Jamaica's public health system since the 1970s. The Jamaican government said the move came after the Cuban government failed to respond to discussions to agree on new terms for the arrangement. Cuba has since announced it will withdraw its 277-person medical brigade from the island. The GOJ says it may still hire some of the doctors on individual contracts. The decision comes as the United States continues to criticize Cuba's overseas medical missions and warns countries about participating in the program. The total cost of Hurricane Melissa has now climbed to about 2 trillion Jamaican dollars, or roughly 12 billion US. According to the Planning Institute of Jamaica, PIOJ, that's about 57% of GDP. The number is about twice as much as earlier estimates that put damages between 6 and 8 billion US. The PIOJ said a comprehensive damage and loss assessment by the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, and the government showed that the social impact had the greatest impact on GDP, about $822 billion. Damage to the productive sectors had the second largest impact, almost 800 billion. This was followed by damage to the environment at 200 billion, and then damage to infrastructure, 130 billion. Meanwhile, JPS says as of February 28, it has restored power to 99% of customers who lost electricity because of Hurricane Melissa last October. Energy Minister Darrell Vaz noted that customers still without electricity are concentrated in the worst affected parishes of Westmoreland and St. Elizabeth. According to Vaz, an additional 5,000 customers are expected to be restored in March. Full restoration is expected by April. Seprod CEO Richard Pandoy says the company has sold International Biscuits, the company behind brands like Butterkist and Snackables. He said the sale is part of a broader strategy to strengthen Seprod's balance sheet and focus on core operations. International Biscuits generated about $1.3 billion in revenue and roughly $24 million in profit in 2024. He said the focus is now on integrating the businesses it has acquired over the past 2 years. Seprod will continue to distribute the biscuit brands for the next 5 years. Global oil prices surged past $100 per barrel over the weekend amid the fallout from the US and Israel's war on Iran. Brent crude, the international benchmark, rose by more than 30% on Sunday. At one point, it topped 119 USD a barrel. Crude oil prices have surged by about 50% since the US and Israel launched joint strikes on Iran on February 28. US President Donald Trump brushed off the spike, calling it short-term. Trump said he believes oil prices will drop rapidly when the destruction of the Iran nuclear threat is over. He said the increase is a small price to pay for world peace. That's what's hot in business.
to you by JMMB Group, your best interest at heart.
Are you living on or in possession of family land? Do you want to sell or subdivide the property? Use eLand Jamaica to search for details on the property. You can complete a title search and verify the owner before you sell the property. If your name does not appear on the title, register the land or clarify the existing title in your name before you sell. A title is a notice to the world of your ownership of land. For more information, contact the National Land Agency at 876-750-5263 or 876-946-5263. The National Land Agency, one goal to serve you better.
Welcome back. Let me start by greeting our viewers. Let's see who's online, starting with Nana Sen, sending greetings from far, far, far away, not as cold as last week. We've got Antoinette saying good night to the moneymakers, tuning in from dark, dark Black River. Darkness is not a deterrent to my weekly Tuesday fix. Does that mean you don't have light? No, but you're online, so you have something. Are you part of the 1% that hasn't gotten their light back yet? Or is it that people around you don't have it? What's going on there, Antoinette, in dark, dark Black River? Techie Investor says greetings. We've got Dwight joining from Spanish Town as usual. Travis in Florida checking in. Raquel saying good night to the moneymakers, unbothered. Noting the rain, rain, rain. It was rainy today in Kingston. Javon. What happened to my comments not showing up now? I'll put that one up for me, please, Sash. Javon saying good night. Daniel's protege is daring to have a purpose and letting it be known. Go-getters all day, day. Philberg, budget blessings, Jamaican in TCI. We've got Ingrid checking in from Bull Bay, St. Andrew. Ashton saying greetings. Roswell saying good evening to all viewers. And we've got Jason in Constant Spring area of Kingston, and D. Duncan representing the Bronx, as well as Shalisha Hudson from Mobay, and Dwayne checking in from Guyana on vacation. Thank you so much for tuning in from all over Jamaica and all over the world, especially this evening, our diaspora viewers. Happy belated International Women's Day, by the way, because all around the world, women are getting things done, and our diaspora women are definitely no exception. You're helping to build businesses and homes and the economy, even from far away. So why not make it easier by using Tap Tap Send to send money home simple, fast, and conveniently? Download it now on the Google Play or the App Store. Remember, this only works for people in the US, UK, and Canada who want to send money back home. If you're in Jamaica, it's not going to work for you. So it's for people in the diaspora who want to send money back home. And you can get an extra $10 on your first money transfer by using the code Kalila10. And remember, with Tap Tap Send, there are no transfer fees. So you send $100, your family member gets $100. And in this case, if it's your first time and you use the code Kalila10, your family member actually gets $110. All right, let's get into our show for tonight. Finance Minister Fayval Williams made the first of her two budget presentations. This was the opening presentation. And of course, I have some thoughts. It was pretty short, by the way. It's like an hour and a half. Nigel Clark kind of got us used to the 4 and 5 hour budget presentations. Hour and a half, in terms of time, I appreciate that it was short. In terms of substance, I expected more. But before I get started, let me know what you thought of the presentation. If you watched it, let me know in the comments. Now, one of the biggest stories over the weekend was oil prices surging to over $100 US. I heard that it's back down now, back into the 80s. And as we discussed last week, the cost of oil impacts just about everything, from inflation to transportation costs to your utility bills. Well, the finance minister touched on that by discussing the NIR, the Net International Reserves.
This budget is also being presented in the midst of a serious war that has sent oil prices soaring on the global market. Jamaica imports 100% of our oil, either as crude oil, which Petrojam refines, or as finished products. Petrojam projects its sales target at 12.22 million barrels for 2026. Add to this the millions of barrels that other suppliers in Jamaica buy for our consumption as households and businesses. Madam Speaker, the war in the Middle East has layered another risk in terms of rising oil prices in Jamaica. But Madam Speaker, I want to say to the Jamaican people and businesses, you can continue to have faith in this government. We have built the largest net international reserves of any government, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the net international reserve stands strong at US $6.839 billion as of March 5th, 2026. And Madam Speaker, if we take the gross rather than the net reserves and measure it in weeks of goods and services imports, that would be 36 weeks based on the official figures that the Bank of Jamaica publishes. The global international benchmark is 12 weeks, meaning it's considered adequate for a country if its gross reserves covers 12 weeks of goods and services import. Jamaica has 36 weeks, Madam Speaker. Our NIR is strong. Our net international reserves is strong.
Okay, so what I would have appreciated if she did was to connect the dots a little more clearly for us and say, okay, since we have this international shock because of oil prices, the net international reserves are going to actually absorb that shock. But then again, it depends on how long this shock lasts. Right now, we're seeing that oil prices are already back down, just based on speculation, because Trump says the war is basically over. But is he right? Because we know the fighters in Iran, they are not anything to play with. Iran is very mountainous, and it's really difficult to wage a war in a country like that, very similar terrain to Afghanistan. And we saw how that turned out. Years upon years, that war in Afghanistan dragged out. So yeah, a little more connecting of the dots for us. So she just mentioned oil prices are high and that's a shock, and then mentioned that we have the NIR that is healthy. But connecting those dots would have helped the viewers and the Jamaican public to understand more easily what one has to do with the other. Now, another thing that she spoke about was GDP growth. And interestingly, the PIOJ, the Planning Institute of Jamaica, is now projecting positive growth for Jamaica, 1 to 2% in the upcoming fiscal year.
All told, Madam Speaker, for the current fiscal year that we're ending, the Category 5 Hurricane Melissa year, the PIOJ now estimates that GDP growth will be negative 1.4% for the full year, for the full fiscal year 2025-26, given the significant fallout in the October to December quarter, which was a quarter in which the Category 5 hurricane battered the western parishes. Madam Speaker, both PIOJ and the Bank of Jamaica have had positive revisions to the GDP estimates. The primary impetus for this is the speed with which the economy is rebounding. For the new fiscal year, which will start on April 1, 2026, fiscal year 2026-27, the PIOJ projects that the economy will return to growth in the range of positive 1 to 2%. Madam Speaker, I do not believe that anyone who traveled to Western Jamaica to look at the devastation the day after the hurricane would have believed then that we would be expecting positive GDP growth for the full fiscal year 2026-27, given the devastation that was before their very eyes.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because I was surprised that the projection is for positive growth, and that the projection for last year, the estimate for last year, wasn't worse than it is. So negative 1.4% in a year where we had a devastating Category 5, one of the strongest on record, decimating half of the island. To come out of that with just negative 1.4% growth is really impressive. And then to come out of the following year, 2026-27, with estimated growth between 1 and 2%, which is basically unchanged from where it typically has been. We've been having that level of growth without a hurricane, and then the year after a hurricane to have that, I think that is something that is quite remarkable. And I understand why she mentioned it. I see Orville saying they've been saying 5 and 4 for 10 years. Absolutely right. But it looks like hurricane recovery, it may well just get us there faster because of all the economic activity that is expected to be generated by the rebuilding efforts. Next clip. So she talked also about the Public Procurement Commission opening up contracts for SMEs to help with Jamaica's rebuilding.
I want to start with a special focus on MSMEs. This government remains committed to ensuring that micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises benefit meaningfully from public procurement opportunities. Through collaboration, the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service and the Public Procurement Commission, we're strengthening support for small businesses seeking to participate in government procurement. The Commission, the Public Procurement Commission, has already begun engaging the MSMEs to guide their members through the supplier registration process. A series of targeted engagements will continue to assist entrepreneurs in completing registration and understanding how to compete effectively for government contracts. In the upcoming financial year, we will also advance the implementation of the public procurement set-asides framework, which allows portion of government procurement to be reserved for Jamaican suppliers, including micro and small enterprises. In partnership, Madam Speaker, with the Public Procurement Commission, we will establish and maintain a verified list of qualifying MSME suppliers to enable procuring entities to easily identify eligible businesses when applying the set-asides provisions. Once the system is operational, the ministry will issue a renewed directive to public bodies mandating utilization of the set-aside order with special emphasis on micro-enterprises with annual turnover below $15 million and small enterprises with turnover between 15 million and 75 million. At the same time, Madam Speaker, we will continue working with the Public Procurement Commission to simplify and streamline the supplier registration system so that businesses can more easily enter the public procurement market.
So I don't really know that she said anything new there. They've been talking about simplifying procurement systems for a while. They've been talking about making it more accessible and easier for MSMEs to qualify and to participate in government contracts and public procurement process. I remember specifically Nigel Clark tabling legislation and mentioning, it might have been in his budget speech as well, mentioning what they are doing to that end to make sure that MSMEs can participate more. And here we are, I feel like I'm hearing the same thing year after year. Now, one of the things that did strike me as interesting was some changes coming to the financial sector, particularly pension funds and what they're going to be allowed to invest in.
So, Madam Speaker, the government will be beginning with a carefully calibrated package of regulatory reforms designed to mobilize pools of local institutional savings from pension funds and the life insurance sector, so that they can play a greater yet prudentially governed role in financing infrastructure, housing, energy, and productive private sector investment. These measures are practical, evidence-based, and sequenced to protect financial stability while unlocking capital for growth. Let me start with pensions. The fund held in pensions accounts are long-dated and patient funds, with investors whose return horizons naturally align with the long-term national investment needs. At present, pension funds face a 5% limit of total assets for investment in the equity of private companies. This constraint has materially limited the ability of pension schemes to participate in local corporate and infrastructure financing. Beginning in the new fiscal year, we will begin a process aimed at increasing the percentage of their assets that they can invest in the equity of private companies. We anticipate that together with the Financial Services Commission, we will take a small but consequential step to increase the pension fund private asset limit from 5% of total assets to 7.5% of total assets. This represents a measured, reversible step to allow funds to begin reallocating to well-governed private investments that match their long-term liabilities. Subject to supervisory monitoring, and in the absence of any unforeseen adverse consequences, we will complete the second phase of this increase to 10% by April of 2027.
So basically what she's saying there is that there is a lot of capital tied up in these pension funds and in the financial system in general, but they're not being allowed to adequately invest those funds. And we know that pension funds by nature need to be conservative with how they invest their money because they represent retirement savings for the public, for you, for your mom, for your grandma, for the elderly, and people who may not be able to work, either don't want to work because they've earned their retirement or they're not able to work. And that money needs to be protected. That money needs to be safe. But what they're saying is that there is some more leeway for pension funds to be able to use that money in some more non-traditional ways, a little bit more flexibility. And so that limit, which they could invest in projects, is currently 5%. They're going to move it to 7.5% and then to 10% to allow them to invest in projects because money is there. And especially since Jamaica needs capital to invest in the rebuilding post-Hurricane Melissa, now is the time to free up some of those funds to invest in these projects. And I do think that that is a good move. Now, next, this digital services tax. We've been talking a lot about it since the finance minister revealed the revenue measures a few weeks ago. I was expecting to hear her explain how it's going to work because that was one of the biggest questions. How are you going to implement this digital services tax? She didn't quite explain it, but she did have a few words on the tax.
Taxes. Madam Speaker, I'll take a few minutes on digital services because that's where most of the questions have come from. Taxing digital services ensures fairness, brings in much needed government revenues, keep our tax laws up to date with how people do business, and make sure big companies pay their share. Digital services taxation is now either in place or being discussed in over 100 countries. Madam Speaker, I want to highlight a phenomenon, not just in Jamaica, but I'm sure in other parts of the world. And it's the silent closure of small retail businesses, given the change that has been happening in terms of our ability to easily order whatever we need online without the requisite taxes. This puts our local businesses or local retailers at a disadvantage. It is not equitable or fair. Our local businesses have to compete with tax-free items. And I want Jamaicans to consider that it's the people who work in these retail shops, these businesses, who are affected when they close. It is the security guard who is no longer needed at the entrance or no longer needed to direct you where to park. It is the cleaning crew that comes in early in the morning or late at night that are let go. It is the lease on the building, the electricity and water payments that are no longer made. It is not happening with a loud bang, Madam Speaker, just silently. So the next time you go to a little shop that used to sell little things that you like and it's no longer there, it probably fell victim to items coming in without GCT. Let me hasten to add, though, there's no thought to curtail digital purchases from wherever in the world you wish to buy. You will note you have no trouble getting foreign exchange to make the purchase. I'm simply highlighting a phenomenon that is happening and which, as government, we have to be keyed.
So basically defending the new digital services, it's not at special digital services taxes, adding GCT to digital services, defending it and saying, well, basically, if Jamaican businesses have to pay it, then foreign businesses should have to pay it too, which is fair enough, but we still want to know how it's going to be implemented. Now, interestingly, I got an email today from Meta talking about digital services tax being implemented. So for those of you who use Facebook ads, who run Instagram ads, digital services tax is coming to those services. And I want to share my screen just so you can have an idea of perhaps how this might work and how it might be implemented in Jamaica, although the Meta email did not mention Jamaica. So this is straight from my inbox. Important update, location fees are coming. This is from Meta for Business. Meta says, dear customer, Meta will soon apply new location fees to ads delivered in specific jurisdictions to cover digital service taxes, DST, and other location-based fees imposed on Meta in those jurisdictions. Location fees will apply beginning July 1, 2026 for the ad accounts listed at the end of this email. So just to put it in perspective, Jamaica is not the only country where this is being done. This is a global trend. We're seeing countries around the world implement digital services tax on things like your Facebook ads, your subscriptions, and so on. So it continues, what are location fees? These are additional charges that may apply to ads delivered in select jurisdictions to cover part of the costs associated with doing business in those jurisdictions. These fees are determined by the jurisdiction where your audience is located and your ads are delivered, not your business location. Interesting. Below are the current location fees that may be added to your ad spend after the ads are delivered in the following jurisdictions: Austria, 5%, France, 3%, Italy, 3%, Spain, 3%, Turkey, 5%, the United Kingdom, 2%. Here in Jamaica, it's expected to come on stream, I believe, in September of this year. GCT will be added, which is 15%. I don't know how Meta is going to frame that in this whole context of digital service taxes. It says these jurisdictions and rates may change over time. Example, if you deliver $100 in ads to Italy, where there's a 3% location fee, you will be charged $100 for ad delivery plus $3 location fee for $103 in total. And so you get the point, and the email goes on to explain how this is going to be delivered and how it's going to impact customers. Now, the last clip I want to bring to your attention is one that has to do with a new platform that the government is looking to implement. It is a fixed income trading platform, and that's going to be beneficial to you investors. Here's what she had to say.
The upcoming fiscal year, the government will continue to engage the BOJ on the introduction of new types of instruments to have a more diverse suite of instruments in the portfolio. The introduction of new instruments is expected to improve liquidity and flexibility, allowing investors to match products to their cash flow needs and risk preferences, while offering the government more competitive funding options. New instruments may also enhance market resilience, stability, and financial depth, contributing again to the development of a robust domestic debt market. Madam Speaker, I know that Ordinary Jamaicans who are focused on putting dinner on the table may not be conversant with fixed income trading platforms or the many reforms I have outlined or how it would affect their lives positively. But that is what governments must do: identify friction in the economy and solve it for the benefit of the people. And so, Madam Speaker, our plan is to transform the traditional opaque and fragmented bond markets by centralizing access, automating workflows, and unlocking powerful analytics for all participants. The fixed income trading platforms will establish a centralized and standardized framework for the listing, trading, and management of Government of Jamaica securities. The implementation of the platform is expected to reduce transaction, settlement time, and counterparty risks, and increase participation by both domestic and international investors, thereby broadening the investor base, strengthening price discovery, supporting the development of an efficient yield curve, and enhancing liquidity in the secondary market. Other benefits that are anticipated to be derived from the implementation of the platform are enhanced trading efficiency, transparency, and overall market development within the domestic debt market. To increase secondary market trading, the Government of Jamaica, in collaboration with the BOJ, the Jamaica Stock Exchange, and the Financial Services Commission, intends to launch the fixed income trading platform in very short order, Madam Speaker.
So the fixed income trading platform is coming, and basically what it sounds like is there's going to be an additional market on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. I imagine that that's what they're going to utilize to do this, to allow you to buy and sell government bonds. So that would make it 1,000,000 times easier to buy and sell government bonds. People always are emailing me, asking me, how do I buy government paper? You have to go through your broker. You have to open a special brokerage account just for that purpose. And now you'll be able to do it, I assume, via trading on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, which makes a whole lot of sense in other jurisdictions, even in our region, the smaller jurisdictions. The OECS has a stock exchange, and the primary activity that takes place on those smaller markets is the trading of government bonds. So it's low-hanging fruit for us to allow trading of government bonds via the local stock exchange. So that's an exciting measure to come. I thought I was going to hear an update on the micro stock exchange, which was expected, or which is expected to be launched as early as next month, but we didn't hear that. There are quite a few things that we didn't hear that I was expecting to hear. So although they say brevity is the soul of wit, for a budget debate, I was underwhelmed. I really expected to hear more. And I know she did bust the news a few weeks early on what the revenue measures are, but I still expected some more explanations. Now, before we take the break, let me take some of your comments. So user Q says, if JPS hasn't given me back my light by now, I'd tell them to keep it. Basilio says, this lady favors Kalila. Is him and Auntie Fayval look alike? It's just the hair. It's really just the hairstyle. Nana Sen says, we already know what's happening before the presentation, so let's wait for the PM's presentation next Thursday. Indeed, normally the Prime Minister is the one who comes out with the so-called goodies to balance out the revenue measures and to see what they are giving back to Jamaicans. Javon says, Uncle Nigel did set a high bar, but let's give Auntie Fayval a little grace to grow in her position. Nana Sensei, yep, I agree, it was really flat. Ezekiel says, only the government believes we could not return to positives early. They were so wrong. Romario wants to know what's happening with the Woodcats IPO. Last I heard it was oversubscribed. We don't have a date yet for that listing ceremony. Orville says next year is going to be the same speech with no growth. Bookmark this comment, revisit next year. Then we have Javon says it's good that we have NIR of over 6 billion and we have good credit ratings, but what are we doing to make ourselves less dependent on other countries? Good question. And Akeem says VPN will live on forever. Interesting, Akeem. I don't think VPN will get you out of this one because, as you saw from the email I just read from Meta, the tax applies to where the service is delivered, not where your business is located. So even if VPN is saying that you're located in some other country, if you're running ads to Jamaica, you're still going to get that tax. So there's no avoiding it, at least in the case of Meta and Facebook ads. So let's take our poll question for this evening. It has to do with Cuba. And I want to know, how do you feel about Jamaica discontinuing the medical program with Cuba? How do you feel about Jamaica discontinuing the medical program with Cuba? A, I support the decision. B, terrible news. This will cause a lot of problems. C, I understand why we had to do it, but I don't like it. Or D, other, just leave a comment. How do you feel about Jamaica discontinuing the medical program with Cuba? I support the decision. It's terrible news. This will cause problems. I understand why we had to do it, but I don't like it. Or other, leave a comment. You can let us know in the chat. You can take that poll over on Twitter, here on YouTube, or in tomorrow morning's email at getmoneynews.com. Up next, we've got your market recap, and our analyst is standing by. Recap brought to you by MyMoneyJA.com, the official data partner of Money Media. Get 10% off your subscription with the code MONEYMISSION. The JSE Combined Index lost 3,300 points last week. That's about 1%. 128 stocks traded across the main and junior markets for the week ending Friday, March 6, 2026. 45 made gains, 63 lost value, and 20 stayed the same. 156 million shares changed hands on the Jamaican dollar market, valued at $646 million. R.A. Williams was the week's most traded stock, with 47 million shares changing hands. It opened the new week at 38 cents. Transjam lost 2 cents to start Monday at $6.98, and Kintyre Holdings rounded out last week's most traded stocks. It started the week at 40 cents. Now let's see who had the biggest gains. Sagicor Real Estate X Fund was the top stock last week. It opened Monday up 23%. Pulse gained 18% to start the new week at $1.10. And Fesca started Monday at $3.49, up 16%. On the losing side now, A.S. Bryden & Sons was the week's biggest loser, down 16%. It started the week at $27.25. CAC 2000 lost 12.5% to start Monday at $1.75, and ISP Finance Services lost 12%. Over on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, the composite index lost 10 points or 1% last week. JMMB was the TTSE's most traded stock. The price was unchanged and opened Monday at 80 cents TT. Point Lisa's Industrial Port Development Corporation was the TTSE's top gainer, up 13%. Angostura Holdings fell 9% to open Monday at $10 TT. Over in the U.S., the Dow Jones fell about 3% last week, while the S&P 500 lost 1%, and NASDAQ was flat. At the pumps, the cost of 87 gas was up $3.06 last week, while 90 climbed $4.50. Diesel prices were also up $4.50. In foreign exchange trading, it took an average $156.48 Jamaican to purchase $1 last Friday. That's 22 cents more than the week before. $1 Canadian cost an average $116.31 Jamaican. $1 British pound cost $210.75 Jamaican, and you could buy €1 for $185.52 Jamaican on average. Finally, on the crypto markets, Bitcoin prices fell 6% over the last 5 days, trading at $68,509 on Monday. Meanwhile, Ethereum prices were down 5%, trading at $2,013 on Monday. Market Recap was brought to you by MyMoneyJA, the official data partner of Money Media. Subscribe to my newsletter for money news like this straight to your inbox. Go to getmoneynews.com to sign up. The link is in my bio. Let's get this money. This segment of Taking Stock, The Analysts, is brought to you by Sagicor Investments. The views expressed in this segment are not necessarily the views of Money Media. This information is for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. Please consult a licensed financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Welcome back. Let's take a look at your poll responses before we introduce our analyst for this week. Lavaine says, exposing the retirement funds to more risk, I see. This won't end well. If the market crashes, who is going to bail them out? Roswell says the optimizing of economic growth is one to cheer on. However, unforeseen occurrences, be it this war or another natural disaster, can affect the current budget and its allocation. Nana Sen says, what about the asset tax? Will there be a reduction on that? I don't remember hearing any mention of it in her presentation. She did not mention it at all in the presentation. Ryan said, I support the fixed interest rate income bond trading platform. Javon says, so no more shopping online with no care in the world. Wish that one wasn't touched, but maybe more money to save and invest. It's not so much about shopping online. Remember, it's a digital services tax. So it's not for goods, Amazon and Temu and Shein and them places. It's not a digital goods tax. It's a digital services tax. So your Facebook ads, your subscriptions, probably your Amazon Prime would be affected. Your Kindle purchases, your Audible purchases, your Netflix, that type of thing. Think digital services, not digital goods. So shopping online, it's not quite the same. And think about your inputs for your businesses. So your QuickBooks subscription, your HubSpot subscription, your whatever it is that you use for your business. I'm on StreamYard right now, my StreamYard subscription. All right, let's take a look at the poll responses. So our question was, how do you feel about Jamaica discontinuing the medical program with Cuba? We've got Andel who says B. B was terrible news. This will cause a lot of problems. A few people said B. Shane said B as well. Travis also said B. We are going to feel it. And a couple people said C. C was, I understand why we had to do it, but I don't like it. Ingrid said C. Techie Investor also said C. Akeem, no, Nanosen says, we chose Jamaica. Jamaica will not make the same mistake of the 1970s under Michael Manley. Akeem says, my question is, were the doctors complaining about the previous structure that's in place? And then Basilia says, it came down to siding with America or Cuba, whose regime is about to end. And interesting, if you read that press release from the Foreign Affairs Ministry, explaining why and how this came to an end, they make it seem as if the government, the Jamaican government, was unaware of these of the way that this deal was structured, and that Jamaica was paying the Cuban government and not the Cuban doctors. I feel like that was common knowledge. Like, we all know how communism works. In a communist society, individuals work for the benefit of the entire society and not for personal gain. And so naturally, when you work under a communist society, the proceeds of your labor are going to go towards the general good of society and not to you individually. And so that means that if you are working in Jamaica as a Cuban doctor, your salary is going to go to the general good of the Cuban people. And the premise of communism, or of Marxism, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. So whatever you are able to contribute, you should contribute. And then the government, which governs society, is going to allocate the proceeds of all of our labor according to need. So who needs it the most, not necessarily who earns the most, who does the most labor is going to get the most money, but those who need it the most are going to get the most money. That is the premise of communism. And so now if Jamaica all of a sudden has a problem with this, is it that Jamaica no longer supports the communist regime of Cuba? That is a bigger issue. And I understand, yes, it's not conducive to our labor laws, and the issue of the passport and holding on to the passport. That's another matter that sounds like human trafficking that we've been okay with for decades and turned a blind eye to for decades because it suited us to have these doctors here assisting in our healthcare system. But the bigger question has to now be asked, is it that Jamaica no longer, now that you've admitted and had to confront these conditions and say this is what it is it that Jamaica no longer supports Cuba's communist regime? Because you're saying that you don't think it's right that the doctors don't individually get paid. And if you don't think it's right that the doctors don't individually get paid, then that means you don't think communism is right by extension. Because under communism, people don't get paid individually. The money goes towards the general benefit of society. And I think that's the bigger question that has to be addressed. But anyway, I digress. Let's get into our analyst segment for this evening. And our guest today is Wealth Advisor at Sagicor Investment, Petagaye Sang Rose. Welcome to Taking Stock, Petagaye. Great to have you.
Good evening, Kalila. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
All right. So, Petagaye, over the past 5 years, we've had thousands of new investors joining the market. And as you know, that learning curve can be very, very steep. So for someone who is just starting to invest, what should they focus on first to build a strong foundation and manage that risk?
Great question, Kalila. I think for new investors, they want to take stock of who they are and what they're about. So they primarily want to focus on building a base. They want to ensure that they are focusing on learning, consistency, and risk control.
So I'm having some internet issues. I hope you guys are hearing Petagaye just fine. I wasn't hearing everything that you said, but I did hear you say focusing on risk control. But what about those investors who do have some experience? How often should they reassess their strategy and their performance? And what should they be looking for when they do that?
So as an experienced investor, as you mentioned, what they will be more focusing on is reassessing strategy, looking at performance of their portfolio, and trying to look at blind spots that they might have missed. Because there are always opportunity. How frequently they will review their portfolio may depend on their what we like to call their time horizon. So that's the time frame in which they want to invest or over what period of time. For example, if you're investing towards a home retirement, you may not want to be reviewing your portfolio daily. However, if you have a short-term goal, then you may want to review it maybe quarterly, 6 monthly, just to ensure that the investment is operating the way you want it to, and you're able to rebalance and to pivot if needed.
Now, Petagaye, risk and opportunity. These are two things that as investors, we have to balance every single day. Every time we spot that opportunity, we have to weigh the risk. And that applies whether you're a new investor or whether you're an experienced investor. How do we balance those two things?
So risk and opportunity, you want to ensure that as an investor, you are not making emotional decisions when it comes on to risk and opportunity. So you definitely want to assess the why at this given time. Is this investment good for me? Is this company one that has longevity? Is it just because it may be popular right now? So especially now during economic uncertainty, rising interest rates, you may find investors who may rush to sell their stocks. They may rush to buy certain stocks because they think they can get a quick return. So you want to ensure that you're able to assess the returns, assess the risk, because there's always opportunities available, but you don't want to make the wrong decision at the wrong time. Remember that markets react faster than fundamentals. So when you look at making decisions from an emotional standpoint, that's when you can definitely put yourself in risk that you're not ready for. So you want to make sure that you're able to look at it objectively, step away if needed, seek professional guidance if needed, to ensure that you're properly weighing the risk and opportunities that are available to you.
What I notice a lot of investors doing is they react to market hype. So something happens and they panic and sell, or there's a lot of hype around a particular stock and they say, "Ooh, let me buy," and then they end up doing the opposite of what you're supposed to do as investors, which is they end up buying when the stock price is high because there's all this hype around it, and then selling when it's low because there's all this panic and they just want to get rid of it. When as investors, you ought to buy low and sell high. So why is long-term discipline and staying invested often more effective than frequently trading or reacting to short-term movements?
Long-term discipline is often more rewarding because as it's like when you're taking a journey. Sometimes you want to get there fast, and on the road to getting there fast, there's a lot of potholes, pitfalls, maybe physical risk, somebody waiting to hijack you kind of situation. So that's how the market tends to operate when you're not consistent and when you're not disciplined enough to stick to your objective. So all investors usually start out or should start out with a plan. Why am I investing? What is this money for? When will I need this money? And how much risk am I comfortable with? So what you might find, Kalila, is that investors will start out with a 2-year plan. And as you say, something, popularity, somebody mentioned something to them and they rush to make a decision. They would have forgotten what the original objective was. But for persons who are able to consistently stay the course, evaluate, stay informed to be able to make decisions, but not stay informed to react. So once we are able to curb that reaction, that immediate reaction, then you will find that over time, it is more rewarding. So I just want to share that wise investing usually comes from having clear goals, plus risk awareness, plus consistency, plus discipline. And that will equal wise investing. So once you're able to stay the course, set your objective, and stick with your timeline, it usually equals better reward for investors.
Thanks so much, Petagaye, giving us some tips there on investing wisely at every stage. So check out Sagicor Investments for your investment needs. Take a final break and come back with your comments. Of Taking Stock, The Analysts, was brought to you by Sagicor Investments. If you're ready to level up your money, make sure you get a copy of my brand new Money Mission workbook. Get it at Fontana Pharmacy in Jamaica or worldwide on Amazon.com. Learn how to manage your money, manage your debt, and start investing to create wealth. Let's get this money. Final comments here from the crew. Roswell says, the only online shopping I am doing is buying discounted stock more and more. Jeff Bezos, he's rich, not doing the opposite like others, spending unnecessary on things with no return on my money. All right, Roz. Lanezra says, asset tax ain't removing anytime soon, maybe after the next election. They conveniently just didn't even mention it. And you know that the financial institutions have been calling for its removal for years, ever since it was implemented. No sign of it going anywhere anytime soon, especially now that they need the money because revenues are down because of Hurricane Melissa. Lavaine says, all these years the deal was like that, so they are playing dumb. At least I think they are playing dumb. Lanesra says, Cuban doctors were underpaid and they knew it, which is why I said it suited their agenda and it suited their needs. So they accommodated it, even though they knew, I believe they knew. They're now trying to present it as if this is something that they didn't know, but that is the premise of communism. Ryan says the Jamaican government cannot publicly admit about knowing of the Cuban government arrangement with its people in foreign trade service. If Jamaica admits they know, it will be sanctioned by the USA. O'Shane says, work to pay government? Hell no. Well, that is why the majority of communist regimes around the world have failed, because people, I believe, are genuinely self-interested. And you're going to look out for self above anything and anyone when it comes down to it, when it comes down to survival of the fittest, you're not looking out for no communal good. You're looking out for you, yourself, and perhaps your family, hopefully your family members as well. But at the end of the day, man comes first. And it is really hard to motivate people to work for other people's interests in generally speaking. So the way that capitalism versus communism is set up, capitalism thrives upon people's natural self-interest. I work hard and I want to reap the fruits of my labor. If I work harder than you, why must you get more than me because you have more picking than me? So I took the initiative to go to school and learn a trade and become a doctor and have this really specialized skill and earn all this money, but I didn't have any kids. So I'm working hard, but I'm getting a smaller share of that labor, the fruits of that labor than you, just because you have 5 pickney and I have no pickney. Is that fair? And it becomes really difficult to motivate people in that type of system, which is what communism essentially is. Ideally, in a perfect utopian world, sure, we all work for the collective good. Me do for you, you do for me. But at the end of the day, the way human nature is set up, the self-interested wins. And that's why capitalism has won out in the end. And almost all communist regimes have died, even over in China, which still maintains some grasp of it. Capitalism has been taking over the past 20 years, more and more and more. We see that being the case with China, and it is part of the reason China's economy has exploded as fast as it has. Tavares says, tell long-term discipline to GK and NCB shareholders. Ouch. Balanta, though, says persistent, consistent commitment with relentlessness. And then we have Lanezra saying we need to invest in our people. If Cuba can turn out these top doctors, why can't we? Good question. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us yet another week. It has been my pleasure serving you. Somebody was asking about the workbook. So we're sold out at Fontana. I'm waiting on their reorder and the restock. But in the meantime, you can get it at moneymissionja.com. You can order on either Amazon or 7 Crave Marketplace. moneymissionja.com will take you to both sets of links. And if you want local delivery, just click the 7 Crave Marketplace link. They deliver island-wide in Jamaica. And the price is about similar to what you would have paid at Fontana anyway. So that's how you can get the book in the meantime, moneymissionja.com. Thanks so much for joining us. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with a friend, let them know that Taking Stock is on, and we were discussing the budget tonight as well as Cuba and investment strategies, building wealth at every stage of the investment journey. I'm Kalila. I'll see you again next week.